percussion on a whole nother level, coming from my mind.
Choosing your favorite OP from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is like choosing your favorite child. You love each of them so much for so many different reasons, although there's always at least one you can always rule out as your top pick. Please, God, no. I want to reiterate that I truly love every single opening this show has to offer. Yes, even Chase. I actually really dig Chase and may make a video about why at a later point. But after a long period of reflection, I've determined that from a purely musical standpoint, and this is a music channel after all, one OP stands out from among the rest. And that OP is... you saw the title of the video. It's Traitor's Requiem. As I said, this is a music channel, so we're primarily going to be focusing on why the musical arrangement of Traitor's Requiem aligns with the second arc of Golden Wind, and how at points it even enhances the story. I'll also go a bit into the visuals and lyrics, but my focus is going to be on musical composition here. I always want to make sure I'm giving everything a fair shake, and I think it's fair to point out that Traitor's Requiem is not a perfect OP. In fact, it has a few flaws that you won't find in some of the other openings from JoJo. I think the other aspects of the song help elevate it, but to stay fair, let's go over what doesn't work. Again, spoilers. Number 1, the Spice Girl reveal. This is by far the thing that bothers me the most in this opening. Crazy Noisy Bizarre Town already set a precedent of hiding a character's stand before it's been revealed with the iconic Koichi pose. It feels like it would have been incredibly easy to edit Spice Girl out of the first 3 episodes of this arc. Maybe after Koichi Gate they were worried about the lack of stand being memed again, but it's apples and oranges. In Crazy Noisy, Koichi comes to a complete stop and nothing happens for a full second and a half. The Spice Girl segment is part of a fluid shot that goes by in an instant, and with Trish already acting as the transition into the next shot, editing Spice Girl out wouldn't have been noticeable at all. It also takes away from the dramatic reveal during the fight with Notorious Big, so I do think they dropped the ball here. Number 2. Plot spoilers. This one honestly doesn't bother me as much. I honestly think the only thing this OP outright spoils is that the stand era will be important in this arc, which you don't know by the time the crew is departing from San Giorgio Maggiore. I'll look up how to pronounce that real quick. Maggiore. Once you've seen the show or read the manga, you know that there's a lot more being telegraphed here, but I honestly don't think there are any blatant spoilers for first-time viewers. It's easy to say, well, it clearly shows Giorno getting the arrow and stabbing himself with it, to which I reply, sure, I watched this with my partner, and she did guess that Giorno was going to stab himself. And she was joking when she said it. As a quick reminder, within the bounds of Part 5, we've been led to believe that the arrow is dangerous and potentially even deadly, even to stand users. Maybe Black Sabbath's arrow just works differently, maybe Giorno just didn't understand how it worked, but when we first see Traitor's Requiem, we've seen such contradictory information on the arrow that there's no reason to assume stabbing yourself with it is a good idea. Not to mention, once the audience learns what's happening to Bruno, they might assume the arrow could be used as a kind of power-up to bring him fully back to life. It's clear Giorno is using the arrow to stab something, but it could be the boss, Bruno, or himself. The OP doesn't give any of that away. Not to mention, to a first-time viewer, there's the added possibility that this isn't actually representing anything that literally happens in the show. It's not as if Abdal ever makes it to the top of Dio's castle watching the sunset, and it's not as if the Josuke crew ever fights Kira all at once, like what we see at the end of Chase. So yes, does Traitor's Requiem include a little too much imagery from actual events of the show? Probably. Is it as big a problem for first-time viewers as it seems like it is for people who already know the story? I don't think so. Anyways, that's it. That's all that doesn't work for Traitor's Requiem. Now let's dive into what makes this the best JoJo OP. The music of Traitor's Requiem starts out wearing its inspiration on its sleeve, with some calm, reserved opening lines transitioning into a loud, unapologetic wall of sound harkening back to Live and Let Die, one of the most iconic James Bond openings of all time. The rhythms are identical in this section, and the chord progressions are really close too. If we move them to the same key, the resemblance is obvious. Golden Wind may not be a spy thriller per se, but out of all of JoJo, this arc's focus on traveling to beautiful European locales and fending off henchmen as our heroes track down the leader of an organized crime syndicate makes the Bond reference feel rather apt. The Live and Let Die homage continues as these grand, slow-paced chords transition into a frenzied string section taking us through a visual journey of the perils Team Bucciarati has faced so far. The next phrase of the music transitions into more of a standard JoJo sound, mixing traditional orchestra with a strong string section, with a more pop sound focusing on electric and bass guitars. Worth noting at this point that Yugo Kanno, the composer for the show's OST from Part 3 onwards, also composed Traitor's Requiem, so the alignment between the show's music and the OP is understandably very strong. Whereas the majority of the first arc passes by in a flash, this section takes a moment to reflect on two of the biggest turning points leading us into Golden Wind's second arc. First, we have Bruno in the elevator, fully coming to terms with the sheer depravity of the boss as he realizes their escort mission was intended solely to kill Trish, with a nice unzipping visual as if the true, noble Bruno is finally emerging, no longer willing to look the other way from Passione's evil actions. Second, we have Bruno informing the team of his intention to defect. It's not an exact recreation of the scene, but the character's motivations are still fully communicated. Giorno and Abbacchio calmly and confidently accept the brand of traitor, Mista only needs to think for another second or two to follow suit, Narancia is hesitant and only jumps ship once Bruno has already started to leave, and Fugo leans out as if to stop Narancia but stays rooted in place, unable to follow his friends on their suicide mission. A similar melody repeats in the next portion of the verse, but a bit more staccato, as if to match up with the punches and gunshots of our characters showing off their stands. This transitions into a recreation of one of the manga covers at the conclusion of the notorious Big Arc. The lyrics here reflect both the hesitance and commitment of Team Bucciarati, asking if the path of fighting back against the devil will lead to their deaths, before responding that no matter the answer, the team must stay gold and remain committed to their sense of justice. The conclusion of this musical phrase ends with a beautiful cascade of violins as Team Bucciarati descends to the earth, and as our visuals transition from the heroes of this story to the villains. The punchy staccato vocals of before turn into sweeping legato phrases reminiscent of the boss's theme as we see Doppio receive a vision from Epitaph, and in later iterations of the OP we see him turn into his Diavolo form, prepared to handle the fight personally once Doppio is no longer useful to him. The word Requiem is emphasized through a shift from minor chord to major, making this note stand out from the rest of the entire song. As a side note, a wonderful bit of wordplay structuring the song as a literal musical requiem for the traitors who are facing certain death, while also foreshadowing how at the end of Golden Wind, one of these traitors will be receiving their Requiem stand. Back to the music, this transition from minor to major is somehow able to also sound a bit sinister, which also harkens back to the boss's motif from the OST. As spooky as it sounds, it may be surprising to learn that the boss's theme is composed almost entirely from major chords, with a few dissonant tones tossed in to throw us off. I don't know how Kano makes it work, but he's somehow found a way to make major chords sound creepy, and he uses it to great effect in both the boss's motif and here in Traitor's Requiem, just as we see the boss spring into action. Visually, we also see the frame turn upside down as darkness sets in. We see a similar effect of the frame turning right side up in A Little Story from the Past, clearly linking it to Doppio's backstory. However, the visual of Sardinia also calls to mind Abbacchio's death, which cements the stakes of tracking down the boss, shakes the team to their core, but also provides them with a key clue moving forward. All this happens in one of the best titles for a television episode ever, Beneath a Sky on the Verge of Falling. With that in mind, this shot is a visual indicator of, well, exactly that. After Abbacchio's death, the sky is no longer on the verge of falling, it has fallen, and our heroes have no choice but to move forward and pray they can survive. And next, we get to one of the best moments of the song, the key change. I've seen countless covers of this song, and I've noticed something fairly consistently. Here's the key change. And almost every time, without fail, someone covering this song doesn't seem to like that key change. They always try to fix it by adding a few transition chords to act as a mini bridge into the next section of the song. The most common version I've seen is this one. Which makes it sound a bit more natural, since the B scale and E scale use a lot more of the same notes than either of them do with our home chord G sharp. And if you're currently developing a cover for Traitor's Requiem, I beg of you, do not put those chords in. I understand the temptation. This key change does feel unnatural. Most key changes you hear in music only modulate by a pitch or a half pitch. This one jumps down by 2 whole notes from G sharp to E. This is even more disorienting because the melody doesn't even help your ear catch on, as the melody only transitions down by half a step, almost tricking you into thinking the key change is also half a step, before continuing onwards with the same melody as the opening few lines of the song. The sudden shift does feel disorienting. It doesn't feel like a completely different song or anything, but it does feel disjointed, like something's missing, like a record skipping, like some portion of the song has been skipped over. And if all that sounds familiar, here's a reminder of the visuals occurring during this key change. The abrupt change in the sound of the song here is actually a fantastic coordinated effort between the composers and the animators. The key change occurs just as King Crimson activates, so it makes perfect sense that it sounds like there's a bridge or transition missing. In my opinion, even taking the actual interruption of later versions out of it, this moment helps elevate Traitor's Requiem above, say, End of the World. Sure, I'll remember the shock value of Dio interrupting the OP for the rest of my life, but from a musical standpoint, all they had to do was press pause. After all, Dio isn't manipulating the actual timeline of the world, just his place in it. From a musical angle, it's so much more impressive to deliver an audio experience that feels exactly like the listener has experienced King Crimson activating, and just like the characters in the show, you may shrug off the little blip as just an awkward musical transition. Like Polnareff and Giorno with the blood drops, you, as a listener, have to know exactly what you're looking for in order to notice the intentionality of the shift. And I just love that so much. In the final segment of the song, we get a blend of two styles we've already seen so far, a punchy, punctuated vocal, accompanied by a smooth string section, as well as a muted but powerful choral section. As I mentioned, the melody is the same as the one we hear in the slow, serene opening vocals, but the new tempo, key, and instrumentation give it a renewed intensity that make it feel entirely new. The lyrics here also inform the story. When your body perishes, does your prayer disappear as well? From a metaphorical sense, this question fits well with the themes of this arc. Even though these characters are willing to lay down their lives, and several of them do, their dream lives on through the actions of their comrades. As Giorno says, those who carry on the will of the deceased must continue onward. But in a more literal sense, this line also foreshadows Bruno's entire role in this arc. Despite his body falling apart minute by minute, his sheer force of will, plus some magic gold experience powers, is propelling him onwards. His very existence feels like a reiteration of the resounding hell no we get towards the end of the chorus. The lyrics conclude with an affirmation that after defeating the boss, Giorno's heroic role in this world is not ending, but rather just beginning, proclaiming that this is the start of a golden wind. The visuals end with the arrow being deposited into the turtle to keep it safe, and our instrumentation finishes on a frenzied tremolo effect from the violins, resolving into a finishing power chord, with Daisuke Hasegawa giving us a few more triumphant yeahs to bring us home. And that's a close look at the wonderful musical composition of Traitor's Requiem. But this is JoJo, so we're not done yet. In proper JoJo villain tradition, Diavolo decides he's going to interrupt the OP once his final form has been revealed. And of course, what better place to do this than when the song has already indicated King Crimson is activated right at the key change. Here, rather than the silence of Dio's stop time, the music continues, providing a wonderfully eerie operatic rendition of the boss's motif, as we hear, I believe, still our vocalist Daisuke Hasegawa, delivering a speech about the futility of fighting an enemy who can control time. He even mentions singing a song of sorrow, or in other words, a requiem. Extra cool points goes to the Gregorian monk-esque chanting that accompanies the boss's motif and the monologue. It adds a ghostly atmosphere to the whole scene. Another fun detail is that Epitaph is providing a premonition of the actual OP a few seconds from now. It's unfortunately not exactly 10 seconds in the future, that coordination would have been very impressive, but it's close enough that the effect is still really cool. The vocal section of the interruption then carries through the rest of the opening, with the choral section getting a boost and an extra chant to accompany the violins at the very end. They even join in with the yeahs, hinting that Diavolo has completely taken control of the situation, and even the triumphant moments are tainted with the foreboding threat of Diavolo's presence, fitting very well with the menacing game of Among Us that the crew has to play as they track down Chariot Requiem. That being said, I'll fully admit, the Diavolo interrupt feels like a slight rehash of End of the World. I mean, he even does the same thing as Dio, just saunter behind our hero and then arrogantly look back at him. The Diavolo interruption is really cool, but it's going to be really hard for them to ever top the wow factor of the... And now we get to the moment that, in my mind, tips the scales entirely in terms of making Traitor's Requiem the best JoJo OP. You're free to disagree, but this next part is what inspired me to make this video in the first place. So let's break it down. First, the visuals. Most of it is a pretty straightforward recreation of the full Requiem reveal scene, so not particularly complex. I do love the smooth consistency in the cut of Diavolo beginning to look over his shoulder, going straight into the loop of Kuwa as he sees endless versions of himself. And of course, Giorno unravels his hair, giving us a perfect example of good is not nice. As the lyrics declare that we go to rage, Giorno makes Daddy Dio proud with the most menacing of looks as a cracked mid-evolution gold experience looks on. The video filter of the next part is an interesting detail. The graininess implies that we're still seeing a vision from Epitaph. In fact, the quick zoom out from the vision more or less confirms that. Which would explain why, even after being exposed to Gold Experience Requiem, Diavolo is still overly confident that the truth of Epitaph will come to pass. But as he goes in for one final lunge, we watch the full transformation of Requiem, and the following beatdown is so one-sided that we don't even see Diavolo show up again. We just see the rage of Requiem delivering one last Muda rush as Giorno coldly and calmly looks on, and we're out. But before we close it all out, let's head back and analyze the music of Traitor's Requiem version 3, because there's one last detail here that made me practically jump out of my seat when I finally recognized it. Obviously the vocals and the wicked guitar solo here take center stage, but let's try to listen to the string section here. To help you out, I'll play the instrumental version. And if that sounds familiar, it's because you've heard it from Yugo Kanno, you crazy son of a bitch, you did it. Bruno's theme, Nella Cioniara, is hiding in the background of the music here. And this isn't the first time Kanno's done this. Did you know he was also in charge of the composition for Great Days? Well, let's take another listen to the opening notes there. That sounds an awful lot like... That's right, Great Days is actually the bass line to Josuke's theme, but the jazzy rhythm has been transposed into a brass-heavy anthem celebrating Part 4 as a whole. So pro tip, if you see that Kanno is composing any of the openings for Part 6, keep an ear out for more OST Easter eggs, because it seems like he loves doing this. But let's head back to Traitor's Requiem for a second, because you may be asking, why Bruno's motif? Giorno's theme is catchier, more iconic, and, well, Giorno's the main character, right? Well, he sort of is. I don't think it's much of a stretch to argue that Giorno and Bruno both share main protagonist status in Part 5. In fact, Bruno has more of an arc as he comes to terms with his role in Passione, whereas Giorno has one goal in Episode 2 that he completes in Episode 39, and that's kind of it. Another major theme of Part 5 is Bruno essentially passing the torch on to Giorno as a noble leader, pushing the Mafia away from drugs and murder and towards, you know, good crimes. Anyways, that theme is exactly what's being reiterated here. See, Giorno is already represented in the musicality here. At this point in the story, Giorno has received his Requiem stand, a new evolution to his power set that the world has never seen before, and I cannot think of a better way to represent that concept than through a wild guitar solo going all over the place. Guitar solos are frequently very improv heavy, meaning that every time you hear one, there's a good chance that exact version has never been played before. No one knows where the melody's going next except maybe the person playing it, and even that is sometimes in question. So in short, this is the perfect representation of Gold Experience Requiem and Giorno's almost passive role in letting it deliver the final beatdown. But Giorno only receives Requiem through Bruno's sacrificial actions, passing the arrow on like a baton of responsibility. So it makes perfect sense to have Bruno's motif acting as the backing melody to Giorno's guitar solo. Not to mention, with Requiem undoing King Crimson's time skippage, this implementation of Bruno's theme also doubles as a beautiful bridge, finally leading us into a natural sounding transition for the key change of the final chorus. The music for this final refrain also shifts a bit. As if to match the graininess of the epitaph vision, the instrumentation is also scaled back here. The strings and drums disappear completely, leaving us with the vocalist, the choir, and some very quiet electric and bass guitars. If we still read the strings as Bruno and the guitar as Giorno, we can almost read the drums as the rest of the crew, keeping things grounded and moving things forward. But in this moment, they have no power in the outcome of the fight, and everything comes down to Giorno. Without the backing strings, the song has an airy, almost mystic feel that matches with the ethereal vibe of Gold Experience Requiem's appearance, but without the drums, the ship feels rudderless for a few seconds, like things could still go either way. A feeling that's further punctuated by Hasegawa's accentuated vocals, which carry more desperation in this chorus than the first one. But, as Diavolo goes in for his last-ditch effort, the strings and drums kick back in, and we know Giorno has this in the bag. The choir is once again triumphant instead of the ominous chanting of version 2, signaling that the victory in this final battle unquestionably belongs to Gold Experience Requiem. All in all, Traitor's Requiem offers such a complete package full of symbolic meaning in the lyrics, the imagery, and most importantly the musicality, that I feel it is easily my favorite OP. I truly, deeply love every JoJo OP to date, but there's so much wonderful content to unpack underneath the surface in this song that I love it more every single time I listen to it. And that's why, don't at me, Traitor's Requiem is the best JoJo OP. What do you think, Daisuke? Thank you so much for watching. In the comments, let me know your favorite JoJo OP and why. If you say Crazy Noisy Bizarre Town EDM version, I will end you. Or tell me if you have any other songs you want to see me dissect like this. And please give a like and subscribe if you're interested in original music or in more analysis videos like this one. Thank you.